CIR has exposed a culture that allowed abuse of the most vulnerable people in California. The role of the journalist is to shed light, and we've done that. Broken Shield has been a series of stories about a police force within California's state-run institutions for people with severe developmental disabilities, folks with cerebral palsy, profound mental retardation, and severe autism, who really can't defend themselves in any way. They're so vulnerable that the state has decided that it has to have its own police force just at the institutions. And that's their only responsibility, is to protect the most vulnerable people in California. The police force is called the Office of Protective Services. What we found ultimately is that this police force really lacks basic skills on how to do their job and doesn't do basic police work when investigating crimes, including potential homicides and sexual assaults. When you find problems in one area where a situation appears out of control, it's usually indicative of a larger problem. The little I found about them in the public sphere was troubling. It looked like they reported directly to the people they'd be investigating, the people who run the institutions. And if they report to those administrators, that's a serious problem. That's a conflict of interest. The system is very hard to penetrate. The state agency forbid employees, and the police force in particular, from talking to me. In 2005, Disability Rights California had put out a scathing report about how the Office of Protective Services failed to investigate genital lacerations at one developmental center that suggested there was probably a predator who was getting away with it. These severe injuries that were indicative of sexual abuse weren't being handled as sex assaults. So we looked for trends of patient abuse, injuries of unknown origin, unexplained injuries. The level of care at these facilities is supposed to be such that there's eyes on the patients almost all the time. Unobserved injuries should be fairly rare. There were hundreds, from 2008 to 2010, over 700 injuries of unknown origin. There were roughly 250 cases of substantiated patient abuse at just the 5 developmental centers. So people are moving out of developmental centers in really significant numbers. And there's a movement nationwide toward deinstitutionalization. So the population is shrinking, and what we found is that the number of patient abuse cases was rising. Shortly after, another source pointed me to Van Ingram. He was a 50-year-old man who had severe autism, so severe that he wasn't able to speak. In early June 2007, he was discovered on the floor of his room with a caregiver standing over him. He had a severely broken neck and ultimately died as a result. His brother is Larry Ingram, who is a veteran police officer, and from the very beginning, it just didn't seem right to him. His suspicions began when the surgeon who operated on Van pulled him aside and told him this was no accident. Either your brother was body surfing at the Wedge in Huntington Beach, and crashed into the beach, or somebody did this to your brother. There was a biomechanical expert who the Orange County Sheriff Coroner's Office had brought in to assess the case, who said this is likely a homicide. The force required to cause that injury to Van Ingram's neck couldn't have been the result of an accidental fall, which is what they were trying to say. These investigations are hard, period. They're very difficult. When you throw into the mix, the victim is developmentally disabled, might not be verbal, might not be able to speak, might not be able to testify, about what happened, or even if they can speak, because of their disabilities, they're not treated as credible witnesses, which makes the police work, the gathering of physical evidence, so much more important than it even is in normal cases. We've had a tremendous impact, I believe. It's been heartening to find that the state of California has responded. This investigation changed state law. There is a new requirement that the police chief have extensive executive law enforcement experience. In the wake of our reporting, they've finally finished for the most part, their law enforcement manual and have trained officers in how to identify a crime scene, how to collect physical evidence, how to interview victims. Really basic stuff that they had never done before. They started doing in June after our story started running. One of the best moments in all of this for me was after we published our initial stories. An advocate who's deeply involved in this issue wrote to me saying, "This is the type of reporting that saves lives." That's what we aspire to do, type of reporting of consequence.